What's up, everybody? Welcome to House Divided on a Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day to everybody out there celebrating their lost loved ones out there. Important day here in the U.S. of A. Do us a solid like, comment, subscribe to the page. We do appreciate that. It's just me today. No Chad Hastings. I was like, look, man, your kid graduated. I'll handle the Monday show, and you just go have a good weekend. Your graduation weekend. So who the hell knows what Chad's doing? Hope he's having a good one. We're going to talk some Texas football, a little baseball too, a little softball, a little bit of everything. Jump into the Specs chat, chat it up, chat. I'll put some super chats up there if you guys so are inclined to send them. If it's a small group today because it's a holiday or whatever. You're out watching the Liverpool parade right now as it goes on. I'm committed to you guys. I'm giving you the show when I really just want to watch Brits hang off of signage and red smoke. You'll have to forgive me. Real quick, let's talk softball, baseball before we jump into the football side of things, which really centers around me like doing some homework over the weekend. I've been wondering what the super blue chip numbers would look like when the transfer portal was done. I think 24/7 comes up with its blue chip percentage, and I hate it. I respect their work. I just hate the blue chip percentage. A percentage a year ago that would have told you that Oklahoma had a roster better than the Texas roster, and I thought that was insane. And I thought that kind of proved that the blue chip percentage is a little bit flawed. And nevertheless, it's about that time of the year where that's going to pop back up. I updated my own numbers. I think they're better numbers. I think they're more indicative of actual success at the top in college football. We'll get to those in a second. Things looking better and better for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns as they go. First, though, Texas baseball. Shout out to the Longhorns, who are the number 2 seed today in the Austin Regional. That comes out here. Let me put this up there for just a moment. Texas is the 1 seed. See, I'm just covering my face, but that's okay. We'll make this work. UTSA gets the 2 seed. They're red hot. Kansas State, Big 12, 3 seed. Houston Christian, 4 seed. Matched up with UCLA in a possible 2-15. So as the number 2 overall super regional. So kind of a good day for the Longhorns. Should they make it to the College World Series and it's chalk, Arkansas would await them as the number 3 overall national seed. Vanderbilt got the number 1 overall seed, which I guess how you finish matters a lot because you wouldn't have been able to make that case, I think, a few weeks ago. And nevertheless, here we are. So Texas also will have the early 1 o'clock game on Friday. Apparently, Cristel Conti, I read on Orange Bloods, made that request specific. So not the primetime game on Friday, which is what I feel like I'm accustomed to ever since Texas baseball and me covering it has been a thing. So Texas will play early on Friday. It'll leave Kansas State and UTSA to play each other in the primetime game. And then obviously you'll have the losers bracket game and the winners on Saturday. So it does give you a little bit more time I suppose, to get your body ready. I'm curious to see what the reasoning would be for that, but it might just be as easy as a little bit of extra rest does the body a lot of good. But nevertheless, that's their Texas softball team. Man, talk about you want to talk about a team that was on the brink of, if we're being completely honest, they were on the brink of being at a point where the season would have been deemed a failure. That sounds harsh. But they were looking at Clemson was 2nd and 3rd, but bottom of the 8th inning, winning runs on 3rd, no outs. And you're like, oh, this is problematic. Is this thing going to end with Texas having been the number 1 ranked team in the country at one point and then not get into the College World Series? That would have been a major disappointment. It would have been hard to say that this season was a success had that happened. And yet they found a way out of that inning. They got a strikeout. They got a couple of flyouts. Clemson doesn't get the runner home. Texas comes through in the top of the 10th. They win on Saturday. Here we are. Coming up all roses for Texas on the diamond, and so they continue. We'll see. This is where the season really begins for both of these teams, and I thought Jim Schlossnagle said that earlier today as well. This is kind of the real season. So fun times on the baseball front. Now, over to the football side of things. I did get a little nerdy this weekend. By the way, I will pay attention to the chats. I'll make sure that if there's anything out there, I'm glad that you made it, Chris. I'm glad that you made it. Here we are. And yes, Sandman, no playoff baseball for the Aggies. That's not why Chad's not here today. But probably a good thing. Sandman, I mean, look, I don't know that I would say it like that, but you can say it like that. I'm not going to fight you. And by the way, I love the A&M athletic director saying that they're not little brother anymore. Man, it's just real simple. If you have to tell people those things, then you're probably not that thing. Kind of a general rule and philosophy, like in life. And I'll give you a great example of this. Texas fans know this better than anybody. If you have to get on a microphone and declare after a game that Texas is back, you're not back. You're not. You're not really. You know when you're back, when you don't have to say it anymore. That's back. And I think the thing that you give Steve Sarkisian the most credit for since he's been at Texas is that at some point that just didn't get said. That snarky question stopped getting asked, right? It's like put a microphone in front of Sam Ehlinger's face and you're trying to egg him on. No, man. When that question doesn't have to be asked, that is when you're no longer asked. The question doesn't need to be asked. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. Is Texas back? Nobody asked that question anymore. But when Texas had to declare it verbally, man, they're not back. And everybody knew it. They like to hear it. Everybody loved that Sam said it to some degree. You know, but there's another metaphor that I want to use that's completely inappropriate in 2025, but it has something to do with size and a table and just throwing something on the table. And like, it's either big or it's not, right? You're either little brother or you're not, but you don't tell people. Because if you have to tell them, you are. Now, on to my weekend project. And I had done some of these numbers in February, so it's been a few months. If you saw the show back in February, fully transparent, the data hasn't changed completely. I mean, there are only so many more guys at that point in recruiting that were still left to make decisions. There haven't been that many big-time portal guys that have gone to the top schools. And I think when we look at some of these trends, I think everybody's going to realize the portal and the playoff have been good for college football. It has made the Joneses a little bit less of the Joneses, and I don't mean specifically to Texas at this point. I'm just talking about in general. So if we were to go back to the beginning of, let's say 2020, and we're talking about Alabama and Georgia. So half a decade ago, those programs had recruited at a level where they were both sitting at about 40 super blue chip, consensus super blue chips on their roster. Now, what's a super blue chip? A super blue chip is anyone that's been ranked at the very top of any of the major services. So find out where the tiers are for what is essentially is a high 4-star or a 5-star for every network. And everybody's numbers are a little bit different. It's like a 98 for On3 or something like that. And, you know, everybody's metrics are a little bit different, how they get there. Rivals.com is 6.0, and that won't exist moving forward. They're going to go to the 100 numerical system. So at least we'll all either be on yards or feet here in a couple of months. But You have to make one of those. And then in order to be a consensus super blue chip, you have to make it on 2 or more of the lists. That's what makes you a consensus super blue chip. And at the beginning of the decade, Alabama and Georgia were sitting at levels where basically 1 out of every 2 guys, every other guy on the roster was a super blue chip. It is a stack of talent that quite frankly, the world of college football has never seen before. This is not what it looked like in the mid-2000s when Texas and USC were fighting it out for national championships. The numbers were not that gross. In fact, I'll show you the Texas numbers historically in a little bit because it'll make you happy. But when compared to what Alabama and Georgia were doing 5 years ago, wow. I don't know that people have enough of true appreciation for what it looked like when those 2 schools were at their talent acquiring peak. They were averaging about 40 a year, a little bit more at the high end, a little bit, I think at one year, Alabama may have had 45 and Georgia had 43. And just kind of ridiculous, right? And we know what it looked like. Those schools just kept winning every year. The only thing that broke that up was a super sick LSU team with arguably the greatest passing season in the history of the sport. That's what it took to break that up. So before we go, let me make sure I do this right. I wanted to show you guys the 2024 numbers first, okay? So as you can see, last year with the consensus super blue chip rankings, Ohio State was first with 29. Georgia had 28. Alabama had 25. You can see Texas in year 4 of Steve Sarkisian climbing their way up to 4th at 19. And then Georgia's 14. Top 5 teams. All those teams make the playoff except for Alabama. It really gives you an idea of how disappointing and underwhelming of a season that is. That should not have happened. The Alabama roster on paper, just sheer volume of talent, not that far away from Georgia and Ohio State. And look, we saw Texas, the number 4 team in the rankings, a team that got to the national semifinals. We saw them play Ohio State and Georgia, and we would, I think, come away from those games going, Texas is really talented. I think those 2 other teams might have had just a little bit more, just a smidge. Texas lost those games, 2 to Georgia, 1 to Ohio State. None of them were accidents. Nothing was a fluke. Even in a world where Texas punches it in the 4th quarter and ties it up 21-21, anything can happen at that point. But it did feel like Georgia combined over 8 quarters of football was better than Texas. And then you look below that, Oregon, Big Ten champion, but then runs into Ohio State and kind of bad luck, bad news to have to play them a second time, right? A&M doesn't make it. Miami doesn't make it. Clemson makes it. Oklahoma doesn't make it. LSU doesn't make it. You look at that top 10. And what it really points out are the teams that are a cut above. And we can bicker and argue where last season the mark of the dividing line really was. I don't know that there's anything super special about 13 versus 14 that Oregon was the cut. You make Oregon the cutoff, and there will be people who say, we're talking about that's just 1 or 2 or 3 more players than the rest of those. But I do think we can look at Texas A&M, Miami, Clemson, Oklahoma, LSU. And what we can say is none of those schools were Texas, Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State. Leave Oregon aside for a second. Everybody else on that list, probably have to throw Alabama out of that, though. You shouldn't. So it's really Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, right? I feel like we can look at that second half of that list and say, well, Texas played a Clemson team that actually played pretty well the day they played in the playoffs, and Texas was outclassed them. They outclassed Texas A&M in College Station. They outclassed Oklahoma. So when we look at these super blue chip rankings, Oregon feels like the exception where everybody else was at. They just happen to have one more. But then there was a big 4 in Alabama just kind of they vomited mom's spaghetti on their shirt. Now, I want you guys to look at these numbers because a year ago, Texas was 10 off the top, 9 off of second, 6 off of third. There was still some distance. And I think it showed. I think you could see that a year ago. You could see that. When we watched those games, when Georgia came to Austin, they looked like a team that had, and again, what are the super blue chips? They don't all pan out. They don't. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. But when they do, they're Kelvin Banks. When they do, they are Anthony Hill. They are Colin Simmons. They are Quinn Ewers. They are Arch Manning. It's a lot of those guys. So the Georgia and Ohio State still had, and the numbers say you hit about 1 out of every 2 of those. So if a team has 10 more consensus super blue chips on their team, that's probably 5 more legit NFL guys. 5 more. Doesn't mean that the rest of your roster doesn't have those. Ohio State and Georgia would have those too. But if you have an advantage of 10, that's 5 NFL players, and some of those dudes are really good. First, second day guys. Most of them probably are. That's the thing about super blue chips. When they hit and they go boom, and they're first and second day guys. They hit at those levels 100 times at higher rates than the rankings below them when you talk about first round, second round. So I really do think you could watch Texas, and you could watch Texas, therefore, against these other teams, and Oklahoma, for instance, and A&M, for instance, and you would think, yeah, man, it did look like Texas had more NFL guys, good NFL guys, than A&M did. You could see that with the naked eye. And I think against Georgia and Ohio State, you could see that. Now, to be fair, Texas against Ohio State, you didn't have Bond, you didn't have Golden healthy in that game. What does that look like if Texas is anywhere close to healthy at the skill positions? Maybe a completely different game. Let's take a look at this year's numbers. This is what I looked up. These are the final numbers, barring some arrests. Somebody flunks out of school. There's a tragic bass fishing accident. I always say that. It's a Jerry Maguire reference, but it feels better than saying a way that someone could actually die. Here's the 2025 numbers. Guys, this is what it looks like when other teams have NIL. This is what it looks like when Georgia and Alabama continue to reverse to the mean. This is what it looks like when Ohio State reverses to the mean. This year's super blue chip numbers in Texas now is not chasing number 1 by 10. They're chasing number 1 by 5. They're chasing Ohio State instead of by 10 a year ago, 2. Instead of chasing Alabama by 5, they're tied. You can still see the same top 4 exists. Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama. Oregon, I think, has joined that party. And I think now there's a drop-off. And you look at the second half of that list, it's LSU, it's Auburn, Clemson, Miami, Penn State, A&M, Oklahoma. I don't know. Half of those teams make the playoffs. Half of them don't, if that. They should. They should. And when you look at Texas versus an Oklahoma or an A&M this year, remember that what it looked like a year ago when Texas played those teams? And what it looked like when Georgia and Ohio State played Texas, where to the naked eye, it just seemed like they had a few more really important, big, fast, physical, good NFL kind of guys. I think that's what Texas has. I think we're looking now, going into this season, the national champion should come from one of those pool of 5 teams. Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Oregon. I think I don't have enough of a sample size to truly know where the line of demarcation, where does that occur, right? Where do I say it's negligible differences at that point? I kind of think when we look at Oregon in that cluster of schools a year ago, and you're like, one had 14 and the other had 13, that's probably I think 20 is the number. If you're sitting in or really close to 20, you're different than everybody else. Your difference between you and the teams we're talking about oftentimes is more than the actual number of guys that they have. For instance, A&M's got 9 consensus super blue chips on its roster after a couple of years ago being in the 20s. When we talk about a fall from talent grace, A&M has had it. A&M's got 9. Texas has 20. The difference is 11. There's a bigger difference between those two schools than the actual number of guys that A&M has on its roster. Same with Oklahoma. They've got 10. The difference is 10. It's the same. The average says if Texas just hits at median levels, that means they got, before we do anything else, at the top of their roster, they've got 5 more NFL dudes on their rosters playing on their 2 deep in their starting lineups, catching touchdowns, throwing touchdowns, making plays. So Texas goes into this season with those other teams significantly separate in terms of elite level talent on their rosters. Most of it comprised of high school kids. If I were to put up, where Oregon, I'll put this back up. Oregon and LSU, they've used the portal to get themselves into the positions that they're in. Oregon has really used the portal in a way that is starting to minimize the difference that the other schools above them, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, that they're getting in high school. Oregon's attacking the portal, so is LSU. LSU is at the very bottom of that list. They're in the top 15, but they're not in the top 10 without the portal. And they've been incredibly aggressive this offseason. And honestly, my reaction when I look at these teams, I think one of them has a quarterback. When we talk about 6, LSU may have a quarterback. Clemson does have a quarterback. And I don't know about the rest of those teams. Maybe Miami. What the hell am I supposed to think about Carson Beck? He has not gone to a better outfit. So I don't know that he looks any better with Georgia players. Of course, he's not playing in the SEC anymore. Maybe that helps too. Penn State thinks it has a quarterback, right? We can quibble over who the pretenders and maybe contenders might be. But from a talent standpoint, 1 through 5, they have the talent to win a national championship, no questions asked. The only school in that group that knows who its quarterback is confidently is Texas. It's why I don't know that Texas should be the favorite, but I cannot point based on the talent accumulation of the top schools and the quarterback conversations that come with it. I can't argue anybody above Texas. I'll listen to arguments that by the end of the season, Julian Sayin or Dante Moore or somebody like that, or even, maybe Garrett Nussmeier, right? Or Cade Klubnik. I'll listen to the idea that by the end of the year, one of those guys emerges to a level that makes them better than Texas. It can happen. But I can't do it now. I can't. Sorry. Right now. And that doesn't mean that I would pick Texas to win the national championship. It means right now there's nobody that I definitively think I would pick over Texas. There's a part of me that still thinks Georgia's the best team in the country from a talent standpoint. And I just don't know what to make of their quarterback situation. It feels like we're headed towards Georgia and Texas all over again. Now, one more graphic that I wanted to put up on this Memorial Day, and real quick, let me just check the chat. It was the chancellor of the Aggies. Sorry about that. It doesn't matter. It was an Aggie. They're all the same. Austin. Sure. I think I've been eating a lot less. That helps. But some. But I wish I could just be like, no, I went to the gym and dedicated. I've been cheating. I've been using the Dr. Camp Obi Men, cheat codes. It helps. Sorry, if I'm being completely honest. Sandman says UGA's number will be cut by 50% by November. Could be, man. They're not, look, the thing, if we put these, let me put the numbers back up there for just a second to look at the 2025 numbers. 1 and 2 in Alabama. Those 3 schools are going down. 3 and 5 are going up. Technically, so is 6. So is 7. Or most of the 7s. You know, and LSU's, I guess, kind of in the same ballpark that they've been in. Hold on, let me see. Where was LSU the year before? Yeah, LSU went up. Oklahoma, same. Clemson, essentially the same. Miami, essentially, little 2 down. A&M, 3 down. Oregon goes up. And Texas goes up, baby. But everybody else goes down. Ohio State -5. Georgia -3. Alabama -5. No, look, it is an important distinction to make that Texas and Oregon are the schools that are going up, and that Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama have been retreating. There's just no way to get around that. By the way, I do see in Alabama that closed parentheses missing. Now my OCD is not going to allow me to miss that anymore. Okay, so one more graphic I wanted to put up. It's a slightly different group of numbers, but if you're a Texas football fan, oh my God, you want to talk about something that will make you feel good. This is, and I did this 2 years ago, I think right when Chad and I first started doing a show, because I remember when he saw the graphic, he was like, holy crap, like what is that? This is a 20-year window of the number of rivals. This is just rivals. Rivals, super blue chips on every roster for the last 20 years. And if you want to know what Steve Sarkisian has done to the Texas program, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, this one is worth like 1,000,000. Okay, here we go. There it is. Starting from the left to right, you start with that national championship team, and it only had 14. Right? And you can see after the national championship, the numbers go up, they go up. They dip down a little bit, man, but in 2008 and then in 2009, the most that Texas has ever had from a rivals.com standpoint. And then the fallout begins. Actually, it was in 2010, ironically enough, was the roster that had the most, which is one of the all-time great ironic statements of all time. But then you can see the decline begins. Boom. 19 becomes 15, and then 14, and then 13, and then in 2014, in Charlie Strong's first year, the number drops below 10 for the first time. And it takes a long time before that number crawls back. It goes from 8 to 3 to 4 to 2 to 6 to 8 to 9 to 8 to 6 to 9. When Steve Sarkisian takes over the Texas program in 2021, it has 6. Which is the exact same number that it had in Tom Herman's second season. To be fair to Herman, he did take it from 2 to 6 and from year 1 to year 2. But then Sark signs that Kelvin Banks recruiting class, and the number goes from 6 to 9. And then come the big dog classes. Now suddenly it is top 5, top 3, number 1 classes in the country. It goes from 9 to 15, from 15 to 16, from 16 to 18 in 2025. Now, I know I just told you that Texas has 20 super consensus super blue chips, which means there are 20 guys on the roster that have been named. So it's actually, the number's larger than the rivals number, which is kind of strange. But nevertheless, these are just the rivals numbers. We do know that if you were to add and the thing is, you can't do that with these other years because there wasn't a 24/7 or an On3, or I don't even know how far back the ESPN rankings go back. You know, they're the old scout rankings, but I don't even know where the hell those are. So, you know, when you look at a 20-year window, you can use the rivals rankings. Eventually, we'll have enough of a data size to be able to do that with the consensus super blue chips, although that would require a lot of work of me. Please don't ask me to do 20 years of research on that. I don't know that I could do it. But Texas, only in 2010, which I guess is the all-time, file that little nugget away, right? It's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I get it. But This is where the program and the roster has to be to win national championships. In 2025, especially. In 2025, you are not winning a national championship with less than 20 unless you have elite quarterback play. If we think about the last dozen years or so, what teams overcame the Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State talent deficiencies? LSU with Joe Burrow, right? So if you can get Joe Burrow, good luck. Surround him with Joe Burrow's weapons. You can go do it. You can. You can do it the Michigan way. They did it. How did Michigan do it? Well, you get one of the best coaches in the history of football, Jim Harbaugh, and you let him build a roster that gets to sit and develop, and they become juniors and seniors, and then his little magic juice sprinkles on all his under-the-radar guys, and eventually he has a group of NFL prospects in a 1 or 2 season cycle that can match the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States, and by the way, and soon to be Texas right there now in this company. And by the way, when they won a national championship, first round quarterback as well. That helps. The other times it happened, Clemson. So Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence. So you either have one of those dudes at quarterback, or you do whatever the hell Jim Harbaugh was able to do in terms of producing an anomaly. If you go back further than that, it's Jameis Winston, right? Florida State broke that little mold. Before that, it's Auburn with Cam Newton. I mean, the recipe is real simple. Either you have the roster that Texas is starting to have, or you got to find a way to get one of these once-a-generation quarterbacks. Or you find a way to combine the two, and you go win every goddamn thing possible. And I think Texas thought that it had Quinn Ewers and it might be able to pull off, before it was ready, the Trevor Lawrence, the Deshaun Watson. I think they thought Joe Burrow. And that's just not what he was. And thus, as close as Texas was able to get with a top 5 roster a year ago, it needs to be said, it didn't have the quarterback juice to get over the hump. It didn't even have what Michigan had 2 years ago, if we're being completely honest. And now it hopes that it has another quarterback that, in a world where it didn't have a super roster tied to its hip, that he's so good that you could just put him on an Oklahoma roster or a Miami roster or an Alabama, or not an Alabama, but pick any of those teams, any of these teams. The hope would be, hold on, let me put it up there. The hope would be that Arch Manning is so good that you could put him on LSU, Auburn, Clemson, Miami, Penn State, A&M, Oklahoma, and that with those rosters, you could win a national championship. That's what LSU did with Joe Burrow. That's kind of essentially what Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson were able to do. The hope would be that you could get one of those mega guys and put him on a Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, or Alabama, or even Oregon roster. Watch the hell out. Well, there's only one watch the hell out situation in college football this year. Georgia doesn't have that. Ohio State does, potentially. I just think we're a year away from talking about Julian Sayin quite in that capacity. Alabama doesn't have it. Oregon, I kind of feel the same way that maybe in a year from now we're saying that about Dante Moore, but we're not saying it yet. Texas, we're saying about it now. That's why they've got the level of separation in terms of high-end elite talent at the top of the roster from all of the other schools outside of 4 other schools, but they've got the edge at quarterback. They've got the edge at quarterback, and yeah, that kind of matters. It's kind of as simple as that. But one of those top 5 teams should win the national championship this year. Unless, and I will say, God, if you can get special quarterback play, the Georgia and Ohio States of this year the Alabamas and Georgias from 5 years ago. So you might not even quite need Joe Burrow. You could probably get by on Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, which I know that sounds kind of strange, but if you go back and watch what Joe Burrow did, that really can't be replicated. That is the passing game efficiency level of just go find somebody that can beat Vince Young. Like at some point, we have to just say that is probably as good as we're ever going to see it. And if the goal is you have to have that to win a championship, if you don't have one of these rosters, again, good luck. Because I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure we're never going to see what Joe Burrow did quite like that ever again. I'm still mystified by it, but it happened. But you could do what Trevor Lawrence did. Those guys were really, really good, but they weren't, oh my God, we're never going to see that again. Ask yourself, if Arch was on Miami, would he throw for like 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns? Probably. It makes Miami a team that could win a national championship all of a sudden. So I think it's really interesting to when 24/7 and the blue chip percentages and everything else comes out later on, it's going to tell you that the Oklahoma and the Texas rosters are similar. They're not. They're not. And your eyeballs told you that last year at the Cotton Bowl. Didn't it? Didn't it? So I think these are the numbers to pay attention to. And not everybody will see them. It'll be a small group of people. It's not like 1 million people are going to watch this video. But what I would say, you're a smarter football fan. There are 5 teams with talent bases that are separate than everybody else. And if anybody tries to argue that anybody else in college football has a roster that's on the level of those 5, it's ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't. I'm not saying they're smart. They're not smart people. I'm saying that if you're looking at a roster and you're pointing to a guy that was a regular old 4-star and you count him the same as a 5-star, that is just dumb. One guy has the chances of being a first-round draft pick at the rate that the other guy has a chance of just being a good draftable player in general, period. They're not the same thing. So there are 5 schools in college football with rosters set. And you know what's interesting is that Alabama is still in that discussion. They may be the one school that I think we're all kind of being dismissive of. They have a changeover at quarterback. I don't know that we came away thinking that DeBoer was on the level at Alabama the way just 12 months ago. Prior to that, we thought he was with Washington. They're the sneaky national championship bet for my money. On paper, the roster says they're as good as Texas. They're tied. They each have 20 super blue chip level prospects, players going into their programs. That's substantial. If Alabama figures out anything at all at quarterback, if DeBoer does a good job this year, the kind that we've seen he's fully capable of at other schools, then Alabama is a real threat that I don't know that people, if I pop this up and I tell you, look, man, Alabama's roster is as good as the Texas roster in high-end talent players. The difference is that one group of players played really well last year and another's didn't. Although Alabama was beating the dog piss out of Georgia. That happened. We've kind of forgotten that early season game occurred, and we kind of went gaga over Jalen Milroe in Alabama, although Georgia did come storming back in that game. A hard one to completely talk about. But for 30 minutes, Alabama beat Georgia like they stole something. Don't sleep on Alabama. And don't sleep on the move that Oregon has made. In a matter of 15 months, Oregon has risen from where Oklahoma was on this list to within 2 of Alabama. That's a year ago at this time, before they went into the portal and did some work, Oregon would have been minus 15 behind Alabama. And in a span of, I guess, 16 months, they've closed that gap to 2. Now, some of that is Alabama continuing to fall back to the pack, losing transfers, losing guys in the portal that don't want to be in the program anymore and are going to other schools. You know, a Justice Haynes, for example, right, at running back goes to Michigan. That guy, 5-star, number 1 running back in the country 2 years ago, and now he's not at Alabama anymore. But they're not dead. Don't sleep on Alabama, and respect that Oregon is getting its hustle on in a way that's it's allowing it. If it's not there yet, and again, I think the number is 20. That's the ballpark number. If you're within, if you're close enough to 20 that you can touch it, and I'm going to kind of grandfather 18 in. 17, maybe not. 18, I know that we're splitting hairs here. I'm not saying this is scientific. This is just kind of my gut feeling. I might even allow for 17. 18, I'm allowing in. You're in that club. They are in, for me, a talent base worthy of talking about a national championship. All of those other teams are not, unless they get special quarterback play. And the only teams right now, Clemson has that potentially. I mean, I guess LSU does potentially. And in theory, Penn State does. But I am not a believer in Drew Aller. Everybody else, pretenders. Pretenders. And we know that now. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. If one of those teams wins a game early in the season, it does not change who they are. It just means that for 60 minutes, they got cooking. And over the course of 60 minutes, we saw this 2 years ago with Oklahoma and Texas. Teams can play well, and on any given day, you just got to keep asking yourself, if these teams play 10 times, how many times do they win? Ask yourself, if Texas and Oklahoma last year had played 10 times, how many times would Texas have won that game? It's significant. It's a big difference, and it hasn't changed this season. I think the edge has only grown. Okay, let me look in the chat. Let me see if I missed anything. Are there any super chats at all? Here's what I'm going to do. We'll end it. I'll go through the chats. We'll hit Mark says those were Saban players. I can see them going back towards the middle with 8-9 wins max. Well, look, it will not take look what happened to A&M. You know, if Alabama does not have a good season and DeBoer is not able to really recruit at a sensational level, that he will fall below Oregon next year. Those Alabama numbers will continue, be much closer next year potentially to LSU than to Ohio State, Texas, Georgia. So I think it's a pivotal year. They really have to. I mean, Tex guy too. Yeah, man. I mean, LSU wasn't great last year. The only thing that happened is Nussmeier came back, and some people love Nussmeier. Text Guy 2 also says better quarterbacks help overcome some deficiencies. Man, they can overcome all the deficiencies with the right guy. But, you know, that's hard to find. Those guys are not easy to find. Eric says, do I agree with Texas not moving the Ohio State game back to prime time? It's good for Texas that game be played earlier. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Is it a better TV spectacle? No. Is it better for the rest of the nation? No. Is it better for Ohio State? No. Is it better for Texas? Yeah, man, play that game in the day. Don't let those maniacs. Those people are animals, man. You think I forgot what happened in 2006? No. Or, 2005? No. If you could, if you can play that game earlier, yeah, if you can play that game at 7 o'clock in the morning, you would. If you could control that. Cotton says they had Jaden Daniels. They did. And Cotton, that's a great point. Look, that's kind of what I'm getting at, Cotton. When we talk about the level of quarterback play you have to get to match the margins that are required to win a national championship. Now, look, this was in a Michigan year. So, you know, Daniels falls into a category of he ran into a year where Michigan was a special team. That was a team that went to the national semifinals. They came back. They returned all that experience. Tons of NFL guys. They were good up front on both sides of the ball. They had it at running back. They had it at quarterback. They really had it everywhere, right? And Daniels, as good as he was, like LSU wasn't so good with that guy at quarterback that they were able to make up the margin of it, the difference in talent between the rosters. And I think we think of LSU as like, oh, they got one of the stacked rosters in college football. Well, they do, relatively speaking. You know, they've got a top 10 roster, which means against 90+% of the country, they do have a roster advantage. It is, but when they get into the playoffs, do they have a roster advantage? Well, no, not against the top 5. No, they don't. Now, you hope to have a quarterback play that can circumvent that disadvantage. LSU did with Jaden Daniels, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. That overall roster wasn't good enough, even with Daniels, to circumvent the areas of like problematic talent deficiencies that existed. It's hard. I mean, it's no small thing to say, man. And look, when you look at Clemson, part of the thing that made Clemson a little different was their overall rosters weren't like the apex of the sport, but they were on the defensive line and like their front 7 on defense and quarterback for about 8 years. They recruited at a truly nationally elite level. And it's those two things. That's what made Clemson a special outlier. And that for whatever reason, man, I don't know if it was in the water or what, but guys kept coming up and they kept getting them. Those guys kept turning into NFL football players on the defensive line, front 7 side for Clemson. And then Deshaun Watson, followed by Trevor Lawrence, now followed by Cade Klubnik. They have gone on all of those guys, number 1 quarterbacks. Crazy. But, and it'll be interesting to see what Clemson does this year, because they'll have Klubnik. They're never going to be elite top 5 of the 5, and they have not recruited on the defensive line like those championship teams did. So this isn't the same Clemson. They're actually much better on the skill positions. And then at quarterback, that's the super blue chip stacking of talent that Clemson really has. On the defensive side of the ball, it's not like those championship teams under Watson and Lawrence. It's just a little bit different. They'll need, because of that, they can't do it the way the Clemson teams of a few years ago did it, where they could win a rock'em sock'em game of robots. And, oh, by the way, take a look at our number 1 overall quarterback, pick your defense apart. This is not that level of Clemson team. It just takes some unique circumstances in 2025 to pull this off. If you could find somebody that could pull off what Jim Harbaugh did, like, you give yourself a chance. But, man, that's hard. I mean, how many of those examples do we have in the last half generation of football? It's one. It's a one-off. Everything else is a team had a quarterback on an all-time heater. And in the history of Texas football, Texas has only had that one time. That was in 2008. Well, 2005. Although by current measures of passing, although Vince was the number 1 ranked quarterback passer of the year in 2005, the numbers are mid-level compared to what we see now. He was like at a 155 quarterback rating. That's kind of Quinn Ewers-ish. Sam Ellinger-ish from a pass efficiency standpoint, when what Joe Burrow did, Jesus Christ, was almost like 100 points higher. It was just different sport in terms of throwing the football. But throwing the football exclusively, only Colt in 2008 was really at a nationally elite level for an entire season. So Texas has never even had one of those guys. It hopes it has one in Arch. That's the way to win a national championship. The talent base puts them in. The quarterback's got to get them over the top. Kind of as simple as that. All right, guys, I don't see any super chats. I'm taking one last look. It's been, hey, Sandman, that is not what happened. That is not what happened. Pro Football Focus ranked the Texas running back room as the number 3 running back in the country. And Orange Bloods responded to the PFF ranking of the running back rooms. In fact, Do you know how I know that? Because I wrote about it in my 10 thoughts from the weekend, which Sandman tells me you've not read my 10 thoughts today. Shame on you. One person called it the best 10 thoughts of all time. I don't agree with that, but I'm letting you know someone on Orange Bloods called it that. I just think I called that Sunday. I did a good column. But to say that I disagree with Texas having the number 3 running back room in the country is an understatement. And I outlined all the reasons why, including you got to have at least one scholarship running back on campus with more than 4.8 yards per career carry to be the number 3 running back room in the country. And Texas does not have that. Y'all don't get pissy about that truth. It's a truth. It's a truth. However, man, I looked at the other running back rooms that were below Texas on the Pro Football Focus deal. Like I looked at A&M and Louisville and it's like I wouldn't trade those guys for the Texas guys either. So I'm not going to overhype the Texas running back room with like this is the number 3. You got to have at least a guy that averages more. Like for instance, I would trade the entire Texas running back room for Caden Durham of LSU right now. Give me Caden Durham. I'll take some other dudes in the portal or something and fill some spots and we'll get some depth. I'd rather have Caden Durham than all the Texas guys combined. So for me, I would rank LSU's running back room ahead of Texas. But there aren't even that many guys that I would feel that way about. Penn State, Ohio State, or excuse me, Penn State, Notre Dame, they've got guys. You'd say that about their rooms, and they were 1 and 2 on that Pro Football Focus ranking of running back rooms. But to put Texas at number 3, knowing what Penn State and Notre Dame have at the running back position coming back, running backs on scholarship that have more than a 4.8 yards per career carry number, it seems a little unfair to like have Texas right next to those guys. Just me. But FYI, no, we did not. That was a Pro Football Focus thing. But we did make a graphic out of it. That's true. All right, guys, I'm going to roll. I did like an hour. I didn't even realize it's 12:53. I'm going to go be a dad. It's Memorial Day. I don't know. Maybe we'll illegally set off some fireworks. We'll see. Hit that thumbs up button, like, comment, subscribe. I want to remind everybody the title sponsor of the show. Let me put this bad boy back up there. Texas Card House. I haven't played on hijack poker at all today. It's a little disappointing, but that's not their fault. That's my fault. But House Divided brought to you by the guys at Texas Card House, Hijack Poker. If you haven't downloaded the Hijack Poker app, do so today. Play for real money. You can play on your computer too. Like I play it on my MacBook Pro all the time. You can play on your desktop. You can play on your phone. Real poker against real people for real money. You deposit online. You can withdraw it on. You can just telling you, it is, if you're a poker guy, it's there for you. Or you can just go play in person at any of the great Texas Card House locations. 2 in the Houston area, 1 right down from my house here in Spring. So yeah, man, go check it out. Thanks to Specs for being the sponsor of the chat. Guys, until tomorrow, chat will be back and be a regular edition of House Divided.